Have you ever wanted to make a copper proofing parrot like this? Well, in this video, I'm going to run you through step by step how I make one of these, so if that's of interest to you, stick around. So before we get into the build, let's talk about why you would want a parrot. Basically, a parrot is a device used to measure the ABV as it's coming off the still, so basically in real time. And so why is this useful? Well, that's going to give you information that you can use then to make more accurate cuts. So you'll be watching the ABV and as it goes down, which means you're coming towards the end of your run, you can then accurately swap out your collection jar or make a cut at that point. So how does it work? Well, basically the distillate coming off your still comes in here, down through the tube, up the main body, and fills the main body. Your alcometer is then floating in the distillate in the main body, and you're reading off the ABV on the scale on your alcometer. Once the liquid goes past the alcometer, it then cascades over into the discharge cup and then out the discharge tube. And obviously then you've got your collection jar here. So basically that's how it works and why you would want one. So now that we know that, let's get into the build. We're going to need some basic hand tools and some consumables for this build, starting with blowtorch. Now this is just a cheap blowtorch off eBay, disposable gas can with the piezo ignition blowtorch. Next, we've got a file just for cleaning up the solder joints. If we've got any excess on the solder joints, we can just file that down. Got a step drill here. Now this is used to drill out the collection cup. If you order our kit, the hole is already in there, but if you don't order our kit and just source your components yourself, you'll need a step drill to drill out the discharge tube hole. Need a Sharpie to mark out all of your copper pipe to length. You need a ruler, obviously, to measure all the copper pipe to length, and then you need a pipe cutter to cut your pipe. So that's the tools. Now we'll have a look at the consumables. Consumables are, you've got to have flux for your solder joints. This is Baker's soldering fluid. It's lead free. Anything that's lead free and suitable for copper will do. Obviously lead free solder. This is very important. You don't want to have any lead introduced into your parrot. And just a maroon Scotch-Brite. Scotch-Brite's just used to clean up the parrot after it's all soldered together. And finally, we can't forget safety. So we've got safety glasses and gloves. Now when it comes to sourcing all of your components, you can order a kit through us which has everything all pre-cut and assembled in one box. Now you can go out and source all these components yourself, so what I'll do is I'll leave a link in the description below, and that will have all of the components that are used and the lengths of copper pipe that you need. But for today's exercise we're just going to use this kit, so we can now get into it. Now here's all the components to the kit laid out. Now the way I like to do this is to have two sub-assemblies. The first assembly being the main body, and then the second assembly being the input tube. Doing it this way, you can actually clean the components as you go, and then it makes it a lot easier for final cleanup and polishing once it's all assembled. So the first one that we're going to tackle is the main body. The first step in any soldering process is to clean the copper. Now we do this using the maroon Scotch-Brite. So anywhere where the copper surfaces touch, we need to clean. So cleaning that up. We're also going to solder onto the other end of this at a later date, so clean that up as well. Now these are pretty good, that just come out of the packet, but we get them clean as well. And we're soldering onto this face. So. And just like that. Now we're positioning the angle T central to the base plate. All we need to do is go around with a ruler and make sure that it is pretty much central. It's not critical in that it's not a rotating part, so it's not critical that it's not completely centred, but closer to centre the better. Now that we've done that, we'll take our soldering fluid, just run that around the base. It will wick in, meaning that the soldering fluid will go under that cup. Now that we've done that, and with the gloves, probably a good idea to put the gloves on before you start touching the soldering fluid. Okay, and now safety glasses, just in case it stutters. Solder. And when it comes to soldering, we're just heating up that area where the solder is to flow into. And as you can see, it takes a bit because there's a fair bit of mass in this topic here. We're just testing it, just dabbing on ever so slightly. Actually, I'm going to switch out. And then you'll see the solder melt and start to get drawn in to under the cup, under the tea. You can see now that that's gone all the way around. I've got a complete joint. So we'll just let that cool now so that the solder solidifies, and then we can put the main body in. So now that solder's solidified, means that we can go ahead and put the main body in. Okay, just once again, a bit of soldering fluid. And a little bit more. I'm just using a pipette that you can use, just a brush. And now, stick that in there, and as you can hear, it was quite warm still. Now, I do like to run a little bit of soldering fluid just around the actual joint there. And I won't take too much heat this time because I've still got a bit of residual heat in there. Concentrating the heat more on the pipe because that's the cool component. And just testing every so often with the solder just to see if it's melting. There we go, now melting. And you can see the capillary action happening as it gets drawn into that joint. Let me just move the heat around, and that actually draws the solder in. There we have it. That joint's now complete. So now we can move on to the collection cup and tube. So once again, using the Scotch Brite, just clean up all the joints. Okay, they're all looking quite good. Yep. Now there are 4 components to this. We've got the main collection cup, a reducer, then the pipe, and then an elbow. So what I'll do, I'll go ahead and put the soldering fluid on all of those joints. You don't need to use too much of this. But without it, the solder just won't take. Right. Now we can assemble this like so. Actually, I won't put that on just yet, and I'll show you why once this is all soldered up. So same process again, we're just putting heat into it and then dabbing the solder on until we see it take. As before, you know when it's ready, the solder will just melt into the joint. So just keep dabbing. They're nearly there. There we go. It's now being drawn into that joint. So we direct the heat where we want the solder to go. That's it. And then move on to the lower joint. And because we've got a lot of heat in here already, it didn't take too much to draw that solder into the joint. Now we don't want to overdo it, because the more solder we put on, the more we'll potentially have to take away, just to make it look pretty once it's all finished, take it away with the file. So you don't want to go overboard. But now we'll just leave that to cool. Once that's cool, we'll take that and the main body and we'll wash them thoroughly in water, and then I'll show you what we do next. Now that we've got these two sub-assemblies done, they've been soldered and washed to remove any of the soldering fluid residue. Now I like to go around and just using, it's only a fine file, but using the file, go around and clean up any of the excess solder around the joints. You don't have to do this, but it just makes for a much more professional looking finish in the end. So, and this is why I said earlier not to be too heavy-handed with the solder. You only need enough just to make the joint. So cleaning those up, this one's not too bad. That's pretty good for that one. Now, what I like to do now is clean all of this up with the Scotch-Brite. So much easier to do this when it's not assembled. And with this parrot, it's going to have a brush finish, so we're just going to leave the Scotch-Brite finish on it as opposed to a polished finish. Now, a trick here is, this is 1/2 inch copper. It will fit in the chuck of a drill, and you can speed up the process. And do the inside as well. As you remember earlier, I didn't put the elbow on, and that was the reason why. So now that's cleaned up, I'll just go ahead and do this. I'll do that off camera, and then when we come back, we'll assemble everything. Now I've spent a bit of time and I've cleaned up the main body. As you can see, it's all nice and shiny now. All the solder joints have been knocked back using the file, along with the collection tube. Now I've also cleaned up all of the solder joints for these using the Scotch-Brite, so now we can assemble everything. First thing to do is we put the cup on here, and what we want to do is we want to have about 5mm gap between the top of this cup and the top of the body. The reason for this, it's going to be easier when you're looking across it to see your alco meter and take the reading. You could have it level. It's no big deal. It's just going to make it a little bit more difficult to read. So I like to about 5mm down. Turn that upside down. Some soldering fluid. Okay. Now, one very important thing that I forgot to mention. The discharge tube, when that goes in,
you want that 180 degrees to this fitting here. So we need to align that. Reason being is when it's assembled, it's like that. If you were to have that anywhere else, it's going to make it difficult to get your collection cup in, but if you had it the same side, then it's going to actually hit on the tube. So 180 degrees from there, and now that we've got that in there, we'll just solder that at the same time. So put a bit of fluid around that as well. Okay, and it's going to take a bit to get some heat into this now. And what you'll see is the soldering fluid will actually start to bubble and evaporate, and it's just after that point that you can start putting the solder in, or start dabbing it on and checking. No, not ready yet. There we go. And it's being drawn in. Once again, where you focus the heat is where the solder is going to go. These torches don't like being laid on their side. And that's it. So now I'll do this joint. We already had a lot of heat in there, so that's gone in. Solder's flowed in there already. We'll let that cool. Once again, we'll wash it down with water, and then we'll clean that up with the Scotch-Brite, and then we'll move on to assembling the pickup into the body. So I've spent a bit of time and I've got it all cleaned up. I've knocked down the excess solder and just using the Scotch-Brite once again, gone over everything and cleaned it up. The reason I keep doing this is once this is assembled, it's really hard to get your hand in there to get this area here being in here. So I just like to do all of that prior to the final assembly. So now, as I did earlier, I cleaned up all of the solder joint areas. So we just put some soldering fluid on these components now. Once again, don't need to overdo it. And just remember, wherever the soldering fluid is, that's where the solder goes. All right, that's done. So assemble all of this together. Now, these are nice tight fits, so we shouldn't need any clamps or anything to hold all of this into position. So now it's just a matter of eyeing it up. We're eyeing it up this way to make sure that that gap is consistent, and then also turn it around to the camera. We're eyeing it up this way to make sure it's vertical. So once we're happy with that, we can go ahead and solder. And there we have it. So it's just these joints down here that we're doing. Once again, get the joint hot and wait for the flux to boil off. Didn't take much at all, and as I said before, the solder goes where the heat is. That joint's done. Now we're going to do both of these joints here, this one and this one. We are going to end up with a fair bit of solder on that little piece of pipe in between. There's nothing we can do about that, but if it worries you, you just file it off at the end. I think I need a little bit more soldering fluid on there. There we go. And back to heat. We have got quite a mass in that body there now, so it's taking a bit to heat up. Just waiting for that solder. There it goes. It got drawn into the joint. Into both sides. Don't be tempted to grab this and turn it. It's really hot. Right, and that's it. It's now fully assembled. We've just got to let that cool again. Once it's cooled, then we'll wash it with water to get all of the residue off. Then we'll come back with a Scotch-Brite and clean it all up. So it's taken me about 10 minutes, and I've now got the Parrot fully assembled and all cleaned up with the Scotch-Brite. Now this is a brush finish. You could, if you wanted to, polish it up with something like Brasso to give it a mirror sort of finish, but I quite like the brush finish, and anyway over time it's going to tarnish and it's a lot easier to bring back a brush finish. So that's it. That's how you make a parrot. Now if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe, because I will be releasing other videos on still building and the likes, and I've got a really interesting build coming up that may be of interest. So we'll see you then.